Hi, I'm Paul Rippey, and I recently had the pleasure of working on a study that was called Zooming In on Informal Savings Mechanisms in Zambia. And I was invited to share some of my observations about the report. This is not the report, and I urge you to go see the document, find out why the study was done, how it was done, who the audience is, what data we collected, and all that. This is just four things that struck one guy, maybe four and a half things. The first thing that struck me was the great variety of ISMs, informal savings mechanisms, that we found. Now, all the ISMs we talked to were ASCAs, but within the ASCA category, they were all over the place. They differed in the way they were formed, the way they functioned, and they differed a lot in their quality. And by quality, we mean roughly, do they follow their own rules? Do people come to meetings? Do people save? And is it a safe place to save? And we used a schema or a classificatory scheme called forming, storming, norming, and performing. And the groups are formed in whatever ways they're formed, facilitated or not. Then at some point, they're functioning, and then something happens, like maybe a member disagrees, and so they have a discussion. Or maybe there's a problem that comes up and they don't know how to handle it. Or maybe they're just thinking, they say, there's a better way to do this. So they go through whatever internal debate they need to iron out the differences of opinion or to solve the problems they're facing. This often leads to some members leaving the group or new members coming in. More often, it's just a change in procedures. And once that has settled down, once the new membership is in place or the new procedures are in place, those become the new norms, norming. And then after that, many of the groups, or most of the groups, become performing. That is, they systematically and consistently meet the needs of most of their members. A corollary is this. We asked a question to the people who'd been out there in the field, and they interviewed 120 people and did 30 focus groups. And we asked them this question. We said, what correlation do you see between the way a group is formed and the quality of the group? And specifically, what correlation do you see between facilitated groups formed by an NGO and group quality? And they thought about it for a while, and they said, none. And this is very interesting. And when we read the transcripts of all the interviews with the members and the focus groups, there wasn't any particular correlation. There were very good groups that were formed by NGOs, and there were some groups that were formed by NGOs that were not very good. We saw excellent groups that were formed just by community members or formed by just the members themselves getting together and pooling their knowledge. That didn't always lead to consistently good groups either. So no correlation. A second finding that struck me a lot was the equally great variation in the sorts of people who are users of ISMs. Again, they were all over the place: rich, poor, men, women, employed, laborers, ambitious, not so ambitious. We wanted to make sense of that too, so we used another way of classifying them that might be familiar to you. It was called Maslow's hierarchy, designed by the American psychologist Abraham Maslow, who said people have lots of different kinds of needs, but there's certain needs that they have to have satisfied before they really have the space or the liberty to think of meeting their other needs. So the survival needs. And until they have enough to eat and a place to sleep, they can't worry about long-term goals. The second level of his hierarchy is what he calls security. So even if I have enough to eat and a place to sleep right now, I'm still going to be worried unless I have that security that's not going to be taken away from me. Third level he called belonging. After you have your basic needs handled and enough security that you feel okay about that, then you can think about what group you belong to. That could be family or civic groups. Maslow used the word love. Like, do I have people that I love and who love me? The next level up he called self-esteem, or esteem of others. It's like, how am I regarded, both by myself and by other people in the community? The fifth level, after all these other things are handled, is what Maslow called self-actualization. Do people have the opportunity? Are they using their intelligence, their ambition? Are they realizing their dreams? Are they being creative? And this came out in the form of like people building their dream house or buying cows or starting their business or expanding their business, buying that piece of machinery they needed. And we found people at all of those levels. Some people were absolutely dealing with survival needs. Now, in some cases, using the group to help feed themselves. In many cases, and I would call this a survival need, school fees. In terms of the sense of belonging or community, people talked about how the groups were like a family to them, how they loved the members and so on. At the next level, in terms of esteem, it was clear that people took a sense of pride from being in a group. Many of the groups bought group uniforms and looked very smart and would go to parades in the village and say, we're a member of this group. Yeah, and people looked up to them because of that. And finally, at the level of self-actualization, many of the members were using the groups as a source of finance and perhaps moral support, really for realizing their life dreams. A third thing that struck me in the study, and this was really the confirmation of one of the principles of Savings at the Frontier, is that, first of all, people really do love their ISMs. I mean, they're very proud of them. They love them. They go to the meetings. They borrow. They save. They love the share out. They love the loans. They love all of that. They love the commitment savings. So people love their ISMs. However, people also are intelligent, motivated, discerning consumers, and are absolutely happy and willing to shop around for whatever service will best meet their needs. People mix and match among the services. They might take these services from their ISM and take these services from financial service providers or others. And finally, fourth finding, just some of the things that struck me about what people like and dislike. Now, by the way, read the report because there's all sorts of information in there. We looked at the value proposition of financial service providers and of ISMs and compared them and all that. But just a couple of things that popped out to me. One is people really care about proximity. And we looked at proximity in two senses. One is physical proximity, and it goes without saying, we all know this. Nobody wants to travel miles in a taxi to take money from a bank, especially not small sums of deposit. But there's also like a cultural proximity that is just as important. And a phrase that came up in several of the interviews was, well, they are people like us. And this was said especially of the mobile money agents or any agents that are in the village or the town or the market where people live. They say, oh yeah, we like them. They're people like us. And the people that are not like us are the people that make us speak English when that's not our native language, or make us fill out a lot of forms, or make us wait, or treat us impolitely, or take us into a strange environment where we don't feel at home. So having people like us turned out to be really, really important. The other thing that people liked was, I'm going to call it transparency. Now, people didn't use the word transparency as much, and very often they were talking about interest rates. But when they were talking about interest rates, they weren't comparing 7.5% to 11.25%. It was more like the transparency of charges. And one of the things that people liked about mobile money was you paid one time and it was done. And one of the things that people don't like about some other financial services is recurring payments. And people were outraged that if they kept money in the bank, they'd go back and there'd be less money than there was the last time they'd been there. What's that about? I could go on, but I won't. Read the report. Thanks.